Let me just preface this by saying I never like to speak ill of the dead. I really don't, especially when they have just recently died. And so generally, I will allow at least a couple of days to go by out of respect for the person's family, friends, those who are grieving. And as many of you know, how could you miss it? I mean, it's wall to wall. It's been everywhere now for nearly 72 hours, all weekend, starting on Friday. The mainstream establishment media's lionization, not even really, deification, the glorification of Cassius Clay, a.k.a. Muhammad Ali. And look, my thoughts and prayers go out to his family, to his wife, to his children, to those closest to him, and really on a personal note. My dad now has severe Parkinson's. So I know what the Ali family must have been going through. It is a horrible disease. It makes your body an absolute wreck. It ravages your body. It really does. It is a very painful disease. And so really, I feel sorry for Muhammad Ali. I feel very sorry for his family. And truly, my condolences go out to them. However, I'm sorry. But there's only so much BS I can take. There's only so much nonsense, lying, outright lying, that I can take. And that I think a society should take. And what you're now seeing in the last 48 to 72 hours is something out of 1984, out of George Orwell's, it's Orwellian, out of George Orwell's 1984. This whitewashing of Muhammad Ali, of who he really was, of some of his sickening, vile, repugnant beliefs, what he stood for, what he did, his treatment of women, his Jew-hating, his racism, the fact that he was a rabid black Muslim, his draft dodging, it goes on and on and on. They are completely whitewashing this, covering up, sweeping under the rug, who this man truly was, what he represented. In many ways, I think what a dangerous figure he was, and a negative figure, a malignant figure. And I'll get into this. And instead, they're turning him into Saint Muhammad. It's not just ESPN and the liberal jock sniffers. It's CNN, it's Fox News, it's MSNBC, it's the New York Times, it's the Boston Globe. It's just, first of all, because I'm a big boxing fan. I have been since I was a young boy, okay? So I grew up watching Muhammad Ali. In fact, I grew up in the Ali Howard Cosell era. Ali was a complete creation of the liberal media. He was a complete creation of Howard Cosell. And the reason why the media created Muhammad Ali, yes, he was a great fighter, no question about it. He was lightning fast. He had an incredible jab. He could move in the ring. And what's been underrated about him, and I'm surprised people don't even talk about this. They mention it a little bit, but he could take a punch. He had an iron jaw. That was one of the things that was one of his most underrated skills that he had. But this idea that he's the greatest athlete of the 20th century, that's not true. He's not even the greatest, frankly, heavyweight champion of the 20th century. He's not even the greatest boxer of the 20th century. He's not. He was a very good boxer. He was a great boxer. But he wasn't the greatest. That's the title he gave to himself. And the liberal media have picked up that moniker and run with it. Look, Rocky Marciano never lost a fight. Joe Louis, I think, was a much greater heavyweight champion than Muhammad Ali. And unlike Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis defended his title with dignity, with class, with patriotism. He served his country during World War II. They were boxing exhibitions, but he fought them for free to build up the morale of the troops around the, whether it be in Europe or Japan or around the country. Sorry, in the Pacific, not Japan, but in the Pacific and in Europe. Our boys were fighting in Japan and in Europe. Rocky Marciano served our country. Ted Williams, a baseball player, not a boxer, but many great American athletes volunteered and served. Joe Louis, to me, was a better boxer. I think there's no question about that. Rocky Marciano, I think, was a better boxer. Even on a boxing level. Ali lost many. Look, for example, people don't know this, okay? He had 3 fights with Joe Frazier. I know this because I've watched the fights. I'm a boxing fanatic. Not only did he lose the first fight, where Frazier took him down and pretty much shattered his jaw. The second fight, Frazier won that fight. Now, the judges gave it to Ali because he was this liberal lion. He was this celebrity athlete. But watch that fight objectively. Joe Frazier won that fight. Ali stole that fight, or the judges stole that fight from Joe Frazier. This is a fact. That's why in the third and final fight, the Thrilla in Manila, which I think, by the way, is one of the greatest fights of all time, Frazier had to go for a knockout. That's why he was getting battered by Ali so badly at the end. Because as he told everybody, if this goes to the judges, forget it, I'm going to lose. The status that this guy now has, I got to knock him out. In some of his last fights, the judges gave it to Ali. So this idea that somehow he is the greatest athlete or the greatest boxer we ever had, it's bogus. It's nonsense. But let's get to the heart of the matter, okay? To the heart of the matter. This man was created and propped up by the media. And the question is why? Why did the left love this man so much? And I'll tell you, it's very simple. It was one reason, and one reason only. Because he was opposed to the Vietnam War. Because he was a draft dodger. And so the likes of Howard Cosell, and especially the New York Times, and the very famous liberal novelist Norman Mailer, I mean, they deified him. They gave him almost superhuman abilities. And they made him seem not just like a physical titan, but he was a moral titan. Why? Because he dodged the draft. He wouldn't serve. And they say that gave up 3 years of his prime career, where he didn't make any money and he didn't have these prize fights and he sacrificed so much. No, he didn't. He was a coward. Because there are 58,000 Americans who never came back from Vietnam. They didn't dodge the draft. And many, many more who came back maimed and crippled. In fact, Ali openly celebrated the Viet Cong. And the reason why, people don't mention this. They think, he was anti-war and that's why he was a conscientious objector. No. He didn't want to even serve in the military if it meant doing what Joe Louis did, which was just doing these boxing exhibitions to build up morale, even if it didn't mean going on the battlefield, because in his view, he had converted to becoming a black Muslim, and the worst kind under Elijah Muhammad, who preached virulent racism against whites. The whites were the devil. Rabid Jew hating. I mean, you want to talk about anti-Semitism. Ay. Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, the black Muslims. Louis Farrakhan's their disciple. Muhammad Ali was a Jew hater of the First Order. He believed the American government was a white racist government. And he didn't want to serve his country in any capacity because to him it was a racist country to the bone. To the bone. His attitude towards women. He legitimately thought that women should be barefoot and pregnant. He had multiple wives. He publicly humiliated them with multiple affairs. He openly said women should not have the right to vote. Women should not be able to drive a car. Women should not get an education. Women belonged at home to bear babies. That's it. To lay on their back and bear babies. He was such a racist and a bigot. I want you to listen to this, okay? Here is an interview that he gave in his prime, when he was a world-class celebrity. Not when he's some young punk. Saying that the mixing of the races is a horrible, evil thing. Miscegenation, intermarriage. He said it revolted him. He goes, do you think I want a daughter to be half white? I want a daughter to look just like me. He openly said, let the whites marry the whites, let the Chinese, literally, he said this, the Chinese marry the Chinese and the blacks marry the blacks. To me, interracial marriage is completely morally abhorrent and repugnant. Racially repugnant, morally abhorrent. He was a black separatist through and through, who hated his own country. You don't believe me? Here is the infamous interview, and he gave many of these, to the BBC, where even the liberal BBC host is shocked at the retrograde, primitive, racist beliefs and attitudes of Muhammad Ali. Roll it, Britain.
Another thing, when you say integration, it comes under intermarriage too, right? All
right.
Being together.
Right, sure.
And I'm sure no intelligent white person watching this show, or no intelligent white man in his or her right white mind, want black boys and black girls marrying their white sons and daughters, and in return introducing their grandchildren as half-brown black people.
I wouldn't object to that.
Well, you wouldn't, but a lot of them would.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people.
And
no, this is the point.
What I'm trying to say is this. And you don't have it. You say you don't, but you don't have it. You really ain't gonna have it. You on the show, and you got to say that. But
that's not true.
Why would you want to do that?
Because I don't think I'm any different from you. You see.
Yeah, we much different.
I mean, I think society's made us different.
You know we're different, and we all together.
But society's made us different.
No, not society. God made us different.
No, we're just human beings. He made all of us.
We all listen. Bluebirds fly with bluebirds. Red birds want to be with red birds. Listen. Tell me when I'm wrong. Pigeons want to be with pigeons.
But
tell me when I'm wrong. We should have more. They don't have intelligence, but yet they stay together. We should have more intelligence than them, right? Buzzards are with buzzards. Buzzards are with buzzards. Bluebirds are with bluebirds. They all are birds, but they got different cultures. The eagles like to hang out in the mountains. The buzzard like to fly around the desert.
Well,
the bluebird like to fly around the trees and the grass.
There'd be certain problems a buzzard mating with a sparrow, wouldn't there?
What?
There'd be certain.
Right. And we have the problems too.
No,
I don't see no black and white couples in England or America walking around proud, holding their children.
That's because society...
And going out.
That's society's fault. I mean, we've got to educate people around it.
Well, life is too short for me to be raised catching hell for something like that. I'd rather go and be my own. I have a beautiful daughter, beautiful wife. They look like me. We're all happy, and I don't have no trouble.
It goes on. I'll play some more when we come back. But it goes on. He's like, let the whites marry the whites. Let the Chinese marry the Chinese. I don't want miscegenation. I don't want the mixing of the races. Now, this is not even my point. Ultra-liberal Piers Morgan, you know, the Mr. Gun Control guy that CNN eventually got rid of because his ratings were so bad. He was one of the ones that found this cut, okay, and others. He said, if Donald Trump said anything like what Muhammad Ali said, he's finished. He's toast. They're going to crucify the guy. Muhammad? He's a hero. He's one of the greatest men that have ever lived in the 20th century, according to the media. So my question is this. If you claim that you're against racism and against misogyny and against chauvinism and against anti-Semitism, why are you whitewashing this and not giving us the real man who was much more complicated, much more complex, and yes, much more destructive and evil than the liberals are making it out to be? 617-266-6868. I want to hear from you. What do you make of the death of Muhammad Ali and the liberal media's attempt to lionize him as the greatest athlete and one of the greatest Americans ever? Was he the greatest? Your calls next. Look, let me tell you something else they're not talking about Muhammad Ali. Again, you can Google this. Okay, it's on YouTube. He was a racist, and I don't just mean towards whites, which he was, and towards Jews, which he was, but to his own fellow blacks. Look at what he did to Joe Frazier. He humiliated Frazier. For example, he called Frazier an Uncle Tom because Frazier remained a Christian, and Frazier loved America. And not only did he call him an Uncle Tom, he made fun of his features. His physical features on his face. I don't want to repeat them, but obviously racist features. And then he ended up, this is what Ali called Frazier. Look it up. He called him, quote unquote, a gorilla. He humiliated Frazier. He belittled Frazier. He insulted Frazier using racial slurs and stereotypes to go after Frazier. How come the media is not even mentioning this? And they're acting like all he wanted was peace and brotherhood and he loved everybody. And no, he didn't. He didn't. In fact, this is one of the reasons why to this day, Frazier's family can't stand him. They said, my father never forgave him for the way he treated us. He said, whites never insulted us and demeaned us the way Muhammad Ali did. Now, let me ask you this. Let me throw one more log on the fire here. This culture that we now have in sports, the showboating, the trash talking, the yelling, being in your face, the constant one-upmanship, that all began with Muhammad Ali. The bragging, the constant bragging, the taunting, the lack of sportsmanship, this all began with Muhammad Ali. And this is poisoned. It's poisoned football. It's poisoned basketball. It's poisoned baseball. Not so much in baseball, but certainly football, basketball, many other sports. This all began with Muhammad Ali. To me, he had a negative, coarsening influence on our entire culture. And they're trying to tell me that this guy was the greatest? This guy couldn't wear Joe Louis's jockstrap. This is from 774. Jeff, Ali was also a draft dodger. I wonder who took his place in Vietnam. Probably some working class boy who ended up dead. How come the media doesn't talk about that either? 617-266-6868 is the number. One more myth about Ali, and then I want to throw it open to the phone lines. The reason he gave for changing his name to Muhammad Ali, he claimed, remember, he got in bed with Elijah Muhammad, the black Muslims, the Nation of Islam. They were a virulent hate group. They despised whites, hated Jews, hated Israel. Ali would pal around with Yasser Arafat, the known Palestinian terrorist. He claimed that Cassius Clay was a slave's name. It was a name given to him by the slaveholders. That was complete BS. I mean, it was a lie. The Cassius Clay family in Kentucky were in fact extremely well-known abolitionists in the 19th century. They fought to abolish slavery. They hated slavery. In fact, many in their family in Kentucky died trying to get rid of slavery. So when he claimed that Cassius Clay was a slaveholder's name or a name given to him by slaveholders, that was a complete fabrication and lie. Like pretty much almost everything else about his public persona. 617. By the way, just quickly on Joe Frazier. When he was kicked out of boxing for dodging the draft, you know who fought to get him reinstated so he could box again? Joe Frazier. And how does he pay him back? He called him a gorilla and said he was an ugly black man, a gorilla. That's how Ali paid back people who were good to him. 617-266-6868. Hank, you're up next. Go ahead, Hank.
What's up, brother? How we doing?
I'm good. How are you, Hank?
This is all about the name, Mohammed the Great. They're going to invent this in everybody's head day after day after day to think, make us think that Muhammad is the greatest. Well, he's wrong, because he wasn't man enough to put a uniform on that my brother went to Vietnam and died in his uniform for this country. So I don't want to hear about how great he is, because he didn't have the cookies enough to go over and fight for his own country that gave him what he has.
Hank, I got to ask you this. What do you say that, because the liberals are trying to defend that decision by saying, well, it was an act of courage because he gave up a lot of fights, a lot of money, a lot of promotions. It was 3 years of his life that he lost. Those were his prime years. And so he paid for his principles essentially through lost money. That he
So money is the evil of all mankind. Who cares about the money? Our flag is more important than his money is, and he wouldn't even stand up for it.
Thank you very much for that call, Hank. I appreciate it. Mike in Boston. Go ahead, Mike.
Jeff, he called the great heavyweight fighter champion Joe Frazier a man of dignity, a warrior of the first order. When he won a fight, he shook hands. When he lost a fight, he shook hands. He also called him one of the most hurtful insults a black man could give another black man. He called him an Uncle Tom. Not only that, Jeff, I believe the first fight with Sonny Liston was a bag job. There's a book that I read. I can't think of the title right now, but that was an absolute fix. And he had a number of fixed fights early on in his career. He was a media phenomenon. He was a handsome man. He was the Louisville lip. He was flamboyant. He was something new coming across the TV screen. And the promoters like Don King and Bob Arum, they said, this guy is a golden goose. He could not afford to lose 2 or 3 fights early on. They had to keep his momentum going to rake in the money. And lastly, I'll say this. There's 17,000 names on the black granite wall in Washington. There's 17,000 young boys across America who were called to service. And they had the love of country. They went down and they served in Vietnam and they never came home. And in 1965, when he beat Liston, there was a battle called the Ai Duang Valley. And there were 268 troopers killed. 1/3 of those young men, or boys I should say, were draftees. So Muhammad Ali, you're always going to be Cassius Clay to me, and I think you're overrated as a fighter, and you're definitely overrated as a human being.
Thank you very much for that call, Mike. 617-266-6868. Look, as he got older, and as the Parkinson's began to really take its effect, he began to realize, I think, he had been used. Don King used him. The Nation of Islam used him. The black Muslims used him, because when he was no longer making the big money, once he was retired, and then of course he began to lose control over parts of his body as the Parkinson's began to ravage him, they all left him. They all abandoned him. So they used him to milk him for all that he was worth. But then they didn't give a damn about his political principles. They didn't give a damn about his black radicalism or about his anti-Americanism. He was good to them as long as, Mike put it, he was laying the golden goose. Once those golden eggs stopped coming out of the golden goose, once he was no longer laying golden eggs, blank off. Nobody wanted anything to do with the guy. So, to me, in some ways, I feel very bad for him, because I think in some ways he was quite gullible. And I think he got had. And believe me, Don King and the black Muslims and Howard, by the way, Howard Cosell, his entire career, he wrote on the back of Muhammad Ali. Many of these sports writers, their entire careers, they wrote on the back of Muhammad Ali. So he was great entertainment, but I think in the end, the only man that really suffered was him. Tom, you're up next. Go ahead, Tom.
Jeff, it's Tom in Lecanto, Florida, the North Florida chapter Cooner Country, but I'm in the middle of a tropical storm. Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can hear you, Tom. I want you to be safe, Tom. Are you really in the middle of a tropical storm?
Yeah, you're cutting in and out. Yeah, it's coming, Jeff. We're getting a Colin, C-O-L-I-N. If you can hear me, I'd like to make a few points.
Go ahead, shoot, Tom. Just be safe, my friend.
Jeff, thank you for covering this like no one else. I'm 65 years old. I went through, I was in that Vietnam era. I had my selective service card, the draft, all of that. Muhammad Ali, as your callers have said, was a draft dodger. A couple of things. I never heard him speak out against ISIS, and only once. I think it was last December when Donald Trump made a comment, but he never came to the support of the United States and denounced the Islamic terrorists. But you know what, Jeff? If Forrest Gump and his buddy Bubba could serve in the Army, why couldn't Cassius Clay?
Well, that's the thing, Tom. Look, I mean, many other prominent athletes served their country. He refused not to. And as one of the texters put it right now, 617, with all due respect, there are 57,939 names on the Vietnam Memorial. 58,000 American boys never came home. They paid the ultimate sacrifice. You know, they didn't make millions of dollars fighting. They didn't make millions of dollars doing aftershave commercials. They didn't make millions of dollars giving interviews to the likes of Howard Cosell. They were out in the jungles of Vietnam. And we don't honor them. We forget about them. Yet they showed the ultimate courage, the ultimate bravery, the ultimate toughness. This guy stood there, showboated, shouted insults, betrayed everybody who was good to him, demonized whites, demonized even some blacks because they were pro-military like Joe Frazier or pro-American. He mocked Joe Louis. This is Ali. Was a rabid Israel Jew hater of the first order, treated women like garbage, and his views on women, he despised Trump. The Council on American Islamic Relations, this should tell you everything you need to know, CARE, said America lost a great Muslim. He was Jeff, always defending Muslim rights in the United States. Comment, Go ahead, Tom. Shoot.
Okay. Well, it's really raining. We're in the middle of a tropical storm. Jeff, I'm going to sign off here, but this is going to go on till Friday. You realize that funeral's till Friday. It's being said as a worldwide event. I don't know what we're going to do to get through this. It's a big disgrace.
It is. No, it really is. And thank you for that call, Tom. Look, I don't like, honestly, I don't. When somebody dies, I like to show respect to them and their family. But when you start propagandizing, when this is wall-to-wall lionizing about somebody, where you're completely rewriting the past. That's what I mean. It's like 1984. You're completely rewriting who this man was, what he did, what he represented. Hey, someone's got to speak out. Guys, enough is enough. Now, honestly, was he a great boxer? Yes. Did he fight some phenomenal opponents? George Foreman, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton. Some of these guys, were just phenomenal fighters. Sonny Liston, I agree with Mike. I think that first one was fixed, but let that go, okay? Still, he beat Sonny Liston. By hook or by crook, he beat Sonny Liston. So, he took on some really, really good fighters, some really good opposition in his day. He was very fast, very quick. Just gracious in the ring. He had a certain grace, a flair to him. His left jab was one of the best left jabs I ever saw. But guys, easy. Greatest boxer ever? Greatest athlete ever? One of the greatest human beings ever? Saint Muhammad? Hey, come on now. Let's everybody take a deep breath here. Russ, you're up next. Go ahead, Russ.
First of all, dittos to everything that Mike said. I agree with him 100%. And I want to tell you, Jeff, and I don't hardly ever do this, for me, it was a blackout for radio, TV the whole weekend because I could not stand to listen to the BS. And knowing you as well as I feel that I do, I knew that you would have the guts to bring this up, to tell the truth. And I cannot thank you enough, okay?
Oh, thank you, Russ.
All right. Now, telling the complete truth, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, the draft dodger, this is an example of the media withholding damaging history of individuals that they want to protect. Now, he becomes a Muslim. When I say now, back then he became a Muslim, clearly to become a conscientious objector to avoid the draft. And basically, going back in the history of that time, the overwhelming majority of World War II vets, Korean vets, and Vietnam vets could not stand him because he was a draft dodger. And he got stripped of his title. We all know that now for sure. And basically, he was used as a major tool in the anti-war movement, giving aid and comfort to the enemy. And this is why he is loved by the media, the dirty SOB anti-American left that controls the media in this country.
Bingo. Bingo. You nailed it. That's why you're seeing now this despicable display of whitewashing and propaganda. Nonstop. He was the greatest. What a fighter. What a man. What a human being. What a humanitarian. On and never had a hateful bone in his body. The guy's Jesus. The guy's the Mother Teresa in boxing trunks. If you would listen to the talking heads on CNN or Fox or MSNBC. I'm like, do you guys do any reading? Do you guys do any research? Do you guys even know what you're talking about? He was an anti-American, anti-white, anti-Jew hater who despised this country. The reason why he became a black Muslim was not just to avoid the draft. He wanted to spit in the face of Christian middle America. So the country that gave him so much, that made him wealthy beyond his wildest dreams, that gave him the ability to be a celebrity, maybe the most recognized human being on the planet. This is the country you despise? Shame on you. Mark in Long Island. I've got about a minute. Go ahead, Mark.
Jeff, huge fan. I love you very, very much.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bring up, huge fan of the show. I had two questions. The first being that, on December 7th, Donald Trump had put out this tweet saying, Obama said in his speech that Muslims are our sports heroes. What sport is he talking about, and who is Obama profiling? And so a lot of people are now jumping on that tweet right now, trying to make Trump into a racist and an anti-Muslim hater. But unfortunately, he's done so many charities with Muhammad Ali. The point is mute, Oh, yeah, well,
Trump admired Ali. He thought he was a great athlete.
Yeah. But the second thing is, are you against conscientious objection in a time of war?
No.
Suppose someone has...
No. I mean, let me answer that question very briefly when we come back in. Just very quickly, I just want to answer the previous caller's question. Look, I do believe in conscientious objector status. In other words, for example, and there's a long history to back this up, the Quakers. They are pacifists. They are genuinely pacifists. They have been in this country for centuries, and they do not believe in war of any kind. They don't even really believe in self-defense. So they are genuine pacifists. It goes to the core of their religious beliefs and their religious values. If they say, Jeff, look, I'm sorry, we're Quakers, we've always been like this. This has been going on for hundreds of years with us. We do not believe in violence in any way, shape, or form. You attack us, we just turn the other cheek. Literally, we turn the other cheek. We don't have electricity. There's a certain way we believe. We don't want to use certain technology, electricity. The modern world repulses us. This is how we want to live. And we live in communities across, let's say, Pennsylvania or West Virginia or wherever. And so if you ask us to fight, just send us to prison. We're not going to get a fancy lawyer to keep us out of prison like Muhammad Ali did. If you want us to go to prison for a couple of years or whatever, that's fine. But we are conscientious objectors. And usually the government will grant them an exemption because their religious beliefs are genuinely held, genuinely believed. It truly is part of their religion. Muhammad Ali was a different kettle of fish. Muhammad Ali, number one, belonged to a group that in many ways was a terrorist group. People don't want to talk about this now. But the Nation of Islam advocated political violence for political ends. They were black separatists. They were eventually tied to the Black Panthers. They called for a war on police. They literally said America was an illegitimate country, a white racist country that was completely illegitimate That's why he wouldn't go fight in the jungles of Vietnam. It's not because he was a peace and love guy. Look, he bashed other people's brains in for a living. Of course he's not a peace and love kind of a guy. So, to me, it also depends, well, what group do you associate yourself with? Look, in the end, I'm sorry. It takes a lot of courage to get in the ring. I know that. But there's a big difference between going in the ring for millions of dollars and becoming a world-famous celebrity and going to the jungle in Vietnam someplace and getting a bullet potentially in your head. He was a coward. And there were many men and many boys who served in Vietnam. 58,000 didn't come back. Many did. They were the real heroes. They were the men of real courage. Period. Full stop.